What are realistic expectations for Ronald Acuña Jr. in 2025? Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Monday, February 3rd, your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. Dropped a couple of fun ones over the weekend, looked at the spring breakout, how to set up that roster to maybe actually win this time. You got throttled by the Red Sox last year, as well as previewing all of the non-roster invitees and their odds of making the roster, right? Connor Capel, probably not. Anoli Paredes, pretty good chance. Whole thing, bravestoday.com. While you're there, you can subscribe, free or paid. Helps us out a ton over here on Braves Today. And this week, barring any sort of other transactions from Atlanta, as we're getting closer and closer to pitchers and catchers reporting in Northport, we're going to do previews of some of these positions. So this is going to be position player preview week. And today is the outfielders. I want to talk about the projection systems out there, what they have for what these players should do, if we think they're going to go over and under, and things like that. And as much as I want to start with Ronald Acuña Jr., let's go ahead and get the known quantities out of the way first, right? Jurickson Profar, Michael Harris II. I say known quantities. Obviously, there are still questions about Profar and what he's going to do after his breakout last year and everything, but these are the guys not coming off of injury that makes a little more sense, right? And the guy I want to start with is Michael Harris II, because I legitimately think this could be the year, if he's healthy, which has not been a guarantee the last couple of years. He had the back issue 2 years ago after colliding with the wall. He had the hamstring last year. If Michael Harris II is fully healthy, I legitimately think he can be in the MVP conversation in 2025. So let's look at what he's done in his first couple seasons, what the projection systems have him out there to do, and go from there. His first 2 years, so not counting last year where he missed a bunch of time, right? His first 2 years in the league, his average line was 295, 334, 494, 19 homers, 40 stolen bases. And I think he averaged 4.3 WAR in that stretch. Okay, obviously, center field defense helps a ton. I am still banging the drum of I think he's Gold Glove caliber. The National League, unfortunately, is incredibly stacked with good center fielders. And so it's going to be tough to get past your Brenton Doyles, your Jacob Youngs, your Pete Crow Armstrongs to win a Gold Glove in the National League. But I do think that he is Gold Glove caliber. And in a normal talent distribution or in a normal year, he would be able to win a Gold Glove. Gold Glove caliber, even if he doesn't win it. But the projection systems are a little bit split on what he might do. And it's really interesting, too. So you've got Zips and you've got Steamer, both on Fangraphs. If you're going to ask me how to describe what they do, I can't really do that. Nobody really knows how these work. But I'll make you a deal. Dan Sombrowski created Zips. I'll reach out to Dan. We follow each other on social media. We interact from time to time. I'll reach out to Dan and ask him to come on the show just to explain how the heck this thing works and what he thinks of the Braves in 2025. No guarantees on when that'll happen, probably a couple weeks from now, but I'll reach out and ask him. And these two projection systems see the on-base and the slugging for Michael Harris pretty much in the same ballpark. 338 to 334 is Zips versus Steamer on the on-base. 480 to 483 is the slugging for Zips and Steamers. A little bit of a higher on base with Zips, a little bit of a higher slug with Steamer. 294 batting average on Zips to a 284 on Steamer. The thing you have to understand is how far back these systems are looking. And I think Zips is like a 3-year window, your previous 3 seasons. Michael Harris has 2 strong years. Again, he averaged 295 the first 2 seasons. Steamer if it weights more last year, is going to look at the lower production when he was injured and coming back from the injury. He hit 264 last year because of the injury. So that's why those projections are different. But they also have some of the counting stats are a little bit different. Zips has 20 homers. Steamer has 26. Zips has 15 stolen bases. Steamer has 21. End of the day, if Michael Harris is healthy, I feel comfortable staking the position of saying he could be a 25-25 guy. I think 25-25 is absolutely in the cards because he came in right around 2020 in his first 2 years, and they weren't full seasons. He missed time, whether it was a later call-up that first year, or it was the injury early in the year, the back injury in 23. So he missed time in both of those seasons, and then last year obviously missed 2 months. But something feels like it clicked for Michael Harris down the stretch last year. The month of September, he went absolutely nuclear. 316 batting average, a 923 OPS, 8 home runs, 18 RBI, 21 runs in 26 games. And so that's the speed, how hot he was to in the year last year. That's why I want Michael Harris the second leading off to start the year and then figure out what to do when Ronald Acuña Jr. is back. But I want Michael Harris leading off because he's got the best speed of any of the regular starters on the team. He's got the best speed. He doesn't walk a ton. Full acknowledgement there. That whole month of September, he drew 5 walks. He doesn't walk a ton, okay? But if he's able to hit close to 300, he can steal bases. He gives you a reasonable facsimile of what Ronald Acuña Jr. could be at the top of a lineup. So I like having Michael Harris leading off. Jurickson Profar probably batting numbers in the 2-hole. And this is where it gets really interesting because the projection systems aren't entirely buying what he did last year. Reminder, Jurickson Profar hit 280, 380, 459 was the slash line. 24 homers and 10 RBI. It was 10 stolen bases. It was 3.6 WAR. Steamer, which again looks at a smaller sample and everything, has him hitting only 260, so a 20-point drop in batting average, a 350 on base, 30-point drop in on base, and a 408 slug, a 51-point drop in slug. They have him 18 home runs and 7 stolen bases. And so that would move Jurickson Profar from 3.6 WAR, which is what he actually earned last year, to about 1.9. And a lot of people are going to argue that it was dumb to sign Jurickson Profar if he takes a step back like that. And the flip side of this is, and I think Fangraphs did a great job of this in their transaction analysis that they wrote for the Jurickson Profar signing, $14 to $15 million a year is the going rate for a 2-WAR corner outfielder in his early 30s who has the upside of an all-star. That is the going rate for these guys. And even if Jurickson Profar were to regress to the projection, which these systems are always a little bit conservative, if he were to regress to 260, 350, 408, that's a 759 OPS with under 20 homers and under 10 stolen bases, and put it up 2 WAR, that is right in line with what he's being paid. AA's thing here is, hey, we got him, if he reproduces what he did in some of his earlier seasons, right? Not 23 where he was atrocious, but like in 22 and stuff, he's still worth the money we're paying him from a dollars per WAR perspective. But you saw last year, and I'm a believer, and AA's a believer, that the swing changes are real, the approach changes are real, the mechanical changes are real. And if he can repeat what he did with what I would argue is a better surrounding cast than he had in San Diego, if he can repeat that, then you're getting 3.5 WAR of production at a 2 WAR price. And the way you create winning rosters is when you're able to get those values. And most of the players on this roster, because nobody's making more than $22 million, the talent, the floor of the roster is so high, Most of these Braves players are able to outproduce their salary when it comes to WAR. Even Orlando Arcia, we don't think he's that good. He was $2 million last year. We'll get to middle infield in a different show, obviously. I do not want to spend an entire show on Orlando Arcia. I refuse to do that. But we'll get to middle infield and all those options in a later show. Michael Harris II, Jurickson Profar, we feel pretty comfortable with what they're going to do next year. With Profar, the question's where's the ceiling, but we feel pretty good about what they're going to do. The big X factor in 2025 is what does Ronald Acuña Jr. do? And we'll get to that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. The link's in the episode description. Promo code BRAVES. You sign up, new customers get a free play and up to $1,000 in bonus cash with your first deposit. Really ingenious system that they have here. You look at all their statistical projections for whatever sport you want. Basketball, I understand they made a big trade. I'm not a basketball guy, but it was a big deal apparently. Basketball, the Super Bowl coming up, whatever it might be. You build your lineup of higher or lower on all these different statistical projections, right? Let's say it's you'll look at the World Series, at the Super Bowl, not the World Series. You're looking at the Super Bowl. Great. Passing yards, over or under on Patrick Mahomes. You can even do all the fun ones for the props. You can do first down conversions rushing for Jalen Hurts. You pick higher or lower on their projections. Depending on the combination of players you pick for your lineup and what projections, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. The great thing is Underdog is available just about all over Braves country, with the exception of Mississippi. We hate it for you guys when Austin Riley is at home. He obviously couldn't play, but Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, all of that can play Underdog Fantasy. So again, links in the episode description, promo code BRAVES to sign up for a free play and up to $1,000 in bonus cash today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby doing our position player previews. This one is the outfield. And again, Ronald Acuña Jr., this is the big question here. I don't know if this is technically news, not news, whatever. Gonna do that, heard from a source thing, but heard from a source. Ronald Acuña Jr.'s goal is to return by Friday, May 2nd. That is game 32 of the season. That is the start of a 3-game series at home against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Okay? Now, no way a guarantee that's going to happen. Okay? I was talking to some people over the weekend who are close to Ronald, who have spoken to Ronald, and that is what he has told them. His goal is to make it back by Friday, May 2nd. He wants to be back for that Dodgers series. And can you imagine how electric Truist Park will be when you have the last two NL MVPs on the field at the same time, in Shohei Ohtani and Ronald Acuña Jr.? That is his goal. But the question is going to be, how effective will he be when he's back? Because we saw in 2022 how he struggled at times when he came back. And the steamer projections on him are, I think, pretty optimistic. So in 2022, Ronald played in 119 games. He debuted on April 28th. And the reminder here is his injury in 21 was later in the season than his injury last year. So if he were to debut this year on May 2nd, that would be a more conservative time frame than in 2022 when he debuted in April, because last year's injury was earlier in the year than 2022's injury. But in 2022, he hit .266 with a .351 on base and a .413 slug. He had 15 home runs and 29 stolen bases. He also led the National League in caught stealings with 11. He was worth 2.6 WAR. But the issue with that season was, and he talked about this, right? He came back a little bit too early, and he was having to deal with fluid on the knee and discomfort. And you can see it in his numbers. First 48 games of 2022, he was 17-21 on stolen bases. He hit .285 with 7 homers, again in 48 games. The final 71 games, he was 12-19 on stolen bases. So he attempted less and was caught more. he hit 253, so he hit 32 points less, and he only had 8 home runs in those 71 games, whereas he had 7 in the first 48. The kind of common consensus there was he came back a little bit early, he pushed a little too hard, too soon, and he dealt with it down the stretch in 2022. This year, coming back on Friday, May 2nd makes a ton of sense to me. It gives him an extra month or 6 weeks or so to get comfortable on the knee. He also knows more this time because he's gone through this rehab once. It was the other leg, but he's gone through the rehab once before. Now, Steamer's projections, it feels, are very weighted off of that 2023 season. Like, we have to understand that it's entirely possible he's not back to that 2023 form. Reminder, in that MVP season, he hit 337 with a MLB leading 416 on base and a 596 slug. It was a 1.12 OPS. Nuts, okay? Last year, everything was way down. When he got hurt after 49 games, he was batting .250 with a 351 on base and a 365 slug. He wasn't hitting for power. His on base had gone kind of back to where he was in 22. He looked like he looked in 22 from an on base perspective, from a batting average perspective. And he was worse than that from a power perspective. He was in just a funk last year when he got hurt. Steamer thinks he's going to be a lot closer to the 2023 version than the 2024 version. They have him playing 128 games, which again, if he came back on May 2nd and played every single game, that'd be 131. So 128, a day off here or there, whatever. Steamer has Ronald hitting .291 with a 379 on base, which would be, I think, the third or fourth highest mark of his career. It'd be better than it was last year, better than 22, better than like his All-Star year in 2019. I mean, it would be up there with his prime years. A 379 on base, a 510 slug, hitting 26 homers, stealing 44 bags, and putting up 5 WAR. I don't know how I feel about this projection. It feels too optimistic to me. Again, before the injury last season, he was not the same Ronald Acuña Jr. that we saw in 2023. Going into that year, he had played in winter ball. He was trying to get back to he was trying to get right after the knee injury, after the 22 season where it was tough. He worked with Fernando Tatis Sr., who again worked with Profar going into last year. Just keep sending dudes to Fernando Tatis' dad. I like that idea. 291 with 26 homers and 44 stolen bases feels optimistic. But at the same time, the factors that we've talked about, he's coming back an extra month or so later, or he has an extra month or so of rehab, and he's coming back later from this injury than he came back in 2022. Because again, in 24, he played 49 games before he went on the IL. In 2021, it was half the season. It was 82 games before he got hurt. So he got hurt earlier in the year, but he's coming back later. Is it possible that he's closer to that projection? It is. I think it's ultimately better for Atlanta if he is. But this, to me, is the real big unknown on the position player side for 2025. Okay? For the most part, what Austin Riley and Matt Olson and Ozzie Albies are capable of, right? You have questions about what is Sean Murphy going to do fully healthy, playing 4 of every 5 games. You have questions, is Orlando Arcia going to figure out how to be respectable again? What is Profar's ceiling going to be? Is it going to be last year? Is it going to be 2 years ago or whatever? But the biggest question and the biggest X factor in Atlanta's season from the lineups perspective is, what does Ronald Acuña Jr. look like? And figuring that out, I think, is going to give a lot of direction to this team as far as what's going to happen down the stretch. How potent is this lineup going to be? And how much work are you going to have to do to reinforce this lineup at the trade deadline? In just a minute, One of the guys you'll be counting on until Ronald is back is Jarred Kelenic. Let's talk about Jarred Kelenic and the boys and their projections next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of the Monday show of Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby going over the position player preview, starting with the outfield, talking about Michael Harris, Jurickson Profar, Ronald Acuña Jr. And in here is the projections for everybody else, right? I played clips from AA after the Profar signing. Jarred Kelenic is the favorite to start in right field in place of Ronald Acuña Jr. There's going to be 4 other outfielders in spring training with him. Bryan De La Cruz, signed to a minor league deal. Eli White, who back with the organization. Connor Capel, signed a minor league deal. And Carlos D. Rodriguez, who signed as a minor league free agent. They will all be in spring training. And we talked about Jarred Kelenic a little bit last week in the notebook on Thursday about how this kind of feels like it's his last chance to show that he's an everyday player. And if he can break out like that, if he can get back into the everyday player territory that we all believe he is capable of, it does give you a lot of options as far as when Ronald comes back, if you have to sit him down, if you need to, or probably will, defensive replacement for Jurickson Profar late in games, you can put Kelenic in, and things like that. His projection is surprisingly low on playing time from Steamer. They have Kelenic as playing in 42 games and getting only 169 plate appearances, which I don't have to tell you, feels like it's very low. Granted, there was a lot of injuries, but he played in 131 games last year, right? 449 plate appearances. So he didn't stay in all those games, right? He subbed in a lot late for defense, started the game, and then came out for a pinch hitter when a lefty came to pitch or whatever. But the point is, they have Kelenic 42 games, 169 plate appearances, and his line is 236, 304, 410, 6 homers, 4 stolen bases, and 0.4 WAR, which kind of feels like it's almost entirely off the defense. If Jarred Kelenic is a 236 hitter next year, and last year he was a 231, if he's a 236 hitter in 2025, then Atlanta has got to hope that Ronald Acuña Jr. is healthy and can play every day when he comes back. Because a 236 Jarred Kelenic is fine as a 4th outfielder. But if anybody in that outfield goes down, that is not starter quality. That is not something, especially if Orlando Arce doesn't figure it out. Combining Jarred Kelenic and Orlando Arce at the bottom of that lineup, especially on days when Chadwick Tromp is the catcher, or Kurt Casale, we'll talk about that later this week, that's a really tough 7, 8, 9 at the bottom of your lineup. Jarred Kelenic needs to be better than 236. Help us, Tim Hires. You're our only hope. The other projections here, Bryan De La Cruz, 26 games and 112 plate appearances, 245, so better average than Kelenic, with a 291 on base, which I don't have to tell you is not good. Below 300 is not good. And a 400 slug, 4 homers, 1 stolen base, exactly 0 WAR. Because Bryan De La Cruz is not giving you value defensively. Got to understand that. It honestly feels, and we'll get into the bench later in this week, but it feels like Bryan De La Cruz, who has 2 options remaining, is destined to start the year in Gwinnett. If Kelenic struggles before Ronald's back, it's possible De La Cruz gets called up and gets an opportunity. It's possible Kelenic has an option. It's possible he gets sent down if he severely struggles before Ronald is back. If Ronald is back, then the guy you need as your 4th outfielder is a defensive guy, not an offensive guy. And so that's where Eli White comes in, who, by the way, the prediction for Eli White, 5 games and 20 plate appearances. They don't factor in defense in these. They don't factor in defensive replacements. They only really factor in you being in the lineup. So that's why he has 20 plate appearances for 5 games. That's 5 starts is what they're expecting for him all year. Batting average of 221 with a 296 on base, a 338 slug, no homers, 1 stolen base, 0 WAR. Eli White doesn't have options, right? So he has to make the opening day roster, or else you have to expose him to waivers and somebody else can claim him, right? You have to DFA him if he doesn't. Because of that, I expect Jarred Kelenic is the favorite to have the right field job to open the year. Brian De La Cruz is probably in Gwinnett, and Eli White is probably your fourth outfielder, simply because he can play defense really well. Profar's not a good defender. Late in games, if you have a lead, just like you did for Soler last year, and Profar's not nearly as bad as Soler, but just like you did for Soler last year, you can put Eli White in games late for defense in left field. You can put him in right and move Kelenic over to left, whatever you want to do. But the point is, you would have a pretty freaking good defensive outfield, left to right, of White, Harris, and Kelenic. I've seen worse. Carlos D. Rodriguez, 2 games, 7 plate appearances. Reminds me of JP Martinez last year. They acquired him in a minor trade from Texas. He got in just a couple games and then got DFA'd, and we never heard from him again. They have Rodriguez batting .257 with a .326 on base and a .354 slug. No homers, no stolen bases, no WAR. He has all 3 options. He's not debuted yet. I expect him to start off in Gwinnett. I think Brian De La Cruz, Carlos D. Rodriguez, and somebody is your 3 outfielders in Gwinnett to start the year. Connor Capel is on here. They literally don't have him as a single game. Okay. Projected line, if he had to play, is like 215, 299, 344. It's not great. If he clears waivers, he probably also ends up back in Gwinnett. I think he's actually on a minor league deal, so he would just revert back to Gwinnett anyway. I don't think you have to option him or anything, because he's not on the 40-man roster. You just put him in Gwinnett. Brian De La Cruz, Capel, Carlos Rodriguez is probably your Gwinnett starting outfield on opening day for the minors. And then, again, Kelenic is probably your starter in right, as long as he looks competent in spring, with Eli White, by prediction, as your 4th outfielder defensive replacement for Profar late in games. The rest of this week, we're going to do infielders, catchers, the bench, that whole thing. Next week, we'll be talking about the pitching. We'll be talking about the starters. We'll be talking about the bullpen, talking about prospects you might see come up, all of that stuff. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, if you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when we drop that next episode. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.